Hi, everyone. I hope everyone is having a really great Wednesday and enjoying this beautiful weather we've been having. So, we are going to continue with Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. So, last time in our story, if you remember, there was a lot is kind of going on. They realized that the Chamber of Secrets has been open. Harry won the Quidditch match for them. So, there's been a lot going on here. Today, we're going to start with Chapter 11, The Dueling Club. Harry woke up on Sunday morning to find the dormitory blazing with winter sunlight and his arm reboned but very stiff. He sat up and looked over at Colin's bed, but it had been blocked from view by the high curtains Harry had changed behind yesterday. Seeing that he was awake, Madame Pomfrey came bustling over with breakfast tray and then began bending and stretching his arms and fingers. All in order, she said, as he clumsily fed himself porridge left-handed. When you've finished eating, you may leave. Harry dressed as quickly as he could and hurried off to Gryffindor Tower, desperate to tell Ron and Hermione about Colin and Dobby, but they weren't there. Harry left to look for them, wondering where they could have got to, feeling slightly hurt that they weren't interested in whether his bones were back or not. As Harry passed the library, Percy Weasley strolled out of it, looking in far better spirits than the last time he met. "Oh, hello, Harry," he said. "Excellent flying yesterday, really excellent. Gryffindor had just taken the lead for the House Cups. You earned 50 points. "You haven't seen Ron or Hermione, have you?" said Harry. "No, I haven't," said Percy, his smile fading. "I hope Ron's not in another girl's toilet." Harry forced a laugh, watched Percy out of sight, and then headed straight for Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. He couldn't see why Ron and Hermione would be in there again, but after making sure that neither Filch nor any prefects were around, he opened the door and heard their voices from a locked cubicle. "It's me," he said, closing the door behind them. There was a clunk, a splash, and a gasp from within the cubicle, and he saw Hermione's eyes peering through the keyhole. "Harry," she said, "you gave us a fright. Come in. How's your arm?" "Fine," said Harry, squeezing into another cubicle. An old cauldron was perched on the toilet, and a cackling and crackling from under the rim told Harry that there had been a fire beneath it. Conjuring up a portable waterproof fires was the specialty of Hermione's. "We'd have come to meet you, but we decided to get started on the polyjuice potion," Ron explained as Harry, with difficulty, locked the cubicle again. "We've decided this is the safest place to hide it." Harry started to tell them about Colin, but Hermione interrupted. "We already know. We heard Professor McGonagall telling Professor Flitwick this morning. That's why we've decided to get moving." "The sooner we get the confession out of Malfoy, the better," snarled Ron. "Do you know what I think? He was in such a foul temper after the Quidditch match that he took it out on Colin." "There's something else," said Harry, watching Hermione tearing bundles of knotted grass and throwing them at the potion. "Dobby came to visit me in the middle of the night." Ron and Hermione looked up amazed. Harry told them everything Dobby had told them, or hadn't told him. Ron and Hermione listened with their mouths open. "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened before?" said Hermione. "This settles it," said Ron in a triumphant voice. "Lucius Malfoy must have opened the chamber when he was at school here, and now he's told dear old Draco how to do it. It's obvious. Wish Dobby told you which kind of monsters are in there, though. I want to know how come nobody's noticed it sneaking around school." "Maybe I can make myself invisible," said Hermione. "Maybe it can make itself invisible," said Hermione, prodding leeches into the bottom of the cauldron. "Or maybe it can disguise itself, pretend to be a suit of armor or something. I've read about chameleon ghouls." "You read too much," Hermione said. Ron, pouring dead lace wings over the leeches. He crumbled up the empty lace wings bag and looked at Harry. "So, Dobby stopped us from getting on the train when you broke your arm." He shook his head. "You know what, Harry? If he doesn't stop trying to save your life, he's gonna kill you." The news that Colin Creevey had been attacked was now lying as though dead in the hospital wing, had spread through the entire school by Monday morning. The air was suddenly thick with rumor and suspicion. The first years were now moving around the castle in tight-knit groups as they were scared they would be attacked if they would ventured alone. Ginny Weasley, who sat next to Colin Creevey in Charms, was distraught, but Harry felt that Fred and George were going the wrong way about cheering her up. They were taking turns in covering themselves in fur or boils and jump out behind the statues. They only stopped when Percy, apologetic with rage, told them that he was going to write to Mrs. Weasley and tell her Ginny was having nightmares. Meanwhile, hidden from the teachers and roaring and trade talismans, amulets, and other protective devices were sweeping the school. Neville Longbottom brought a large, evil-smelling green onion and pointed purple crystal and a rotting newt tail before the other Gryffindor boys pointed out that he was in no danger. He was a pureblood and unlikely to be attacked. They went for Filch first, Neville said, his round face fearful, and everyone knows I'm almost a squib. In the second week of December, Professor McGonagall came around as usual, collecting the names of those who would be staying at school for Christmas. Harry, Ron, and Hermione signed her list. They had heard that Malfoy was staying, which struck them to be very suspicious. The holidays would be a perfect time to use the Polyjuice potion and try to worm a confession out of him. Unfortunately, the potion was only half finished. They still needed to get the bicorn horn and the bloomsling skin and the only place they were going to get them was from Snape's private stores. Harry privately felt he'd rather face Slytherin's legendary monster than have Snape catch him robbing the office. What we need, said Hermione briskly, as Thursday's afternoon double potions lesson loomed nearer, is a diversion. Then one of us can sneak into Snape's office and take what we need. Harry and Ron looked at her nervously. I think I better do the actual stealing, Hermione continued, in a matter-of-fact tone. You two will be expelled if you get in any more trouble, and I've got a clean record. So all you need to do is cause enough mayhem to keep Snape busy for 5 minutes or so. Harry smiled feebly. Deliberately causing mayhem since Snape Potions class was about as safe as poking a sleeping dragon in the eye. Potions lessons took place in one of the large dungeons. Thursday afternoon's lessons proceeded on in the usual way. 20 cauldrons stood steaming between the wooden desks, on which stood brass scales and jars of ingredients. Snape prowled through the fumes, making waspish remarks about Gryffindors, while the Slytherins sniggered appreciatively. Draco Malfoy, who was Snape's favorite student, kept flicking pufferfish eyes at Ron and Hermione, who knew that if they retaliated, would get a detention faster than you could say unfair. Harry's swelling solution was far too runny, but his mind was on more important things. He was waiting for Hermione's signal, and he hardly listened as Snape paused to sneer at his watery potion. When Snape turned and walked off to bully Neville, Hermione caught Harry's eyes and nodded. Harry ducked swiftly down behind his cauldron, pulled one of Fred's filibuster fireworks out of his pocket, and gave it a quick prod with his wand. The firework began to fizz and sputter. Knowing he had only seconds, Harry straightened up and took aim and lobbed it into the air. It landed right on target, Goyle's cauldron. Goyle's potion exploded, showering the whole class. People shrieked as splashes of the swelling solution hit them. Malfoy got a faceful in his nose began to swell like a balloon. Goyle blundered around, his hands over his eyes, which expanded to the size of dinner plates. While Snape was trying to restore calm and find out what had happened through the confusion, Harry saw Hermione slip quietly out of the door. Silence! Silence! Snape roared. Anyone who has been splashed, come here for a deflating draught. When I find out who did this. Harry tried not to laugh as he watched Malfoy hurry forward, his head drooping with the weight of his nose like a small melon. And half the class lumbered to Snape's desk, and some weighed down with arms like clubs, unable to talk through the gigantic puffed-up lips. Harry saw Hermione slide back through the dungeon door, the front of her robes bulging. When everyone had taken a swig of the antidote and various swellings had subsided, Snape swept over to Goyle's cauldron and scooped out the twisted black remains of the firework. There was a sudden hush. If I find out whoever did this, Snape whispered, I shall make sure that person is expelled. Harry arranged his face into what he hoped was a puzzled expression. Snape was looking right at him. The bell rang 10 minutes later, which rang 10 minutes later, could not have been more welcome. He knew it was me, Harry told Ron and Hermione as they hurried back to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. I could tell. Hermione threw the new ingredients in the cauldron and began to stir feverishly. It'll be ready in a fortnight, she replied happily. Snape can't prove it was you, said Ron reassuringly to Harry. What can he do? Knowing Snape, something foul, said Harry, as the potion frothed and bubbled. A week later, Harry, Ron, and Hermione were walking across the entrance hall when they saw a small knot of people gathering around a notice board, reading a piece of parchment that had just been pinned up. Seamus Finnegan and Dean Thomas beckoned them over, looking excited. They're starting a dueling club, said Seamus. First meeting tonight. I wouldn't mind dueling lessons. They might come in handy one of these days. What, you reckon Slytherin's monster can duel? Said Ron, but he too read the sign with interest. Could be useful, he said to Harry and Hermione, as they went into dinner. Shall we go? Harry and Hermione were all for it, so at 8 o'clock that evening they hurried back to the great hall. The long dining tables vanished, and the golden stage had appeared along one wall. Lit by thousands of candles floating overhead, the ceiling was velvety black. Once more, like most of the school, seemed to be packed beneath it, all carrying their wands, looking excited. I wonder who will be teaching us, said Hermione. As they edged into the chattering crowd, someone told me it was Flitwick was a Julian champion when he was young. Maybe it was him. As long as it's not, Harry began, but he ended with a groan. Gilderoy Lockhart was walking onto stage in robes of deep plum, accompanied by none other than Snape, wearing his usual black. Lockhart waved an arm for silence and called, "Gather around! Gather around! Can everyone see me? Can you hear me? Excellent! Now, Professor Dumbledore has granted me permission to start this little dueling club to train you all up in case you ever need to defend yourselves. I, myself, have done on countless occasions. For full details, see my published works." "Let me introduce my assistant, Professor Snape," said Lockhart, flashing a wide smile. "He tells me he knows a tiny little bit about dueling himself and has sportingly agreed to help me with a short demonstration before we begin. Now, I don't want any of you youngsters to worry. You'll still have your potions masters when I'm through with him. Never fear." "Wouldn't it be good if they finished each other's off?" Ron muttered into Harry's ear. Snape's upper lip was curling. Harry wondered why Lockhart was still smiling. If Snape had been looking at him like that, he'd have been running as fast as he could in the opposite direction. Lockhart and Snape turned to face each other, bowed, at least Lockhart did, with much twirling of his hands, whereas Snape jerked his head irritably. They raised their wands like swords in front of them. "As you see, we are holding our wands in acceptive combative position," Lockhart told the silent crowd. "On the count of 3, we will cast our 4 spells. Neither of us will be aiming to kill, of course." "I wouldn't bet on that," Harry murmured, watching Snape baring his teeth. 1, 2, 3. Both of them swung their wands up over their shoulders. Snape cried, "Expelliarmus!" There was a dazzling flash of scarlet light, and Lockhart was blasted off his feet, and he fell backwards off the stage, smashing into the wall, and slid to it sprawl on the floor. Malfoy and some other Slytherins cheered. Hermione was dancing on tiptoes. "Do you think he's all right?" she squealed through her fingers. "Who cares?" said Ron and Harry together. Lockhart was getting unsteadily to his feet. His hat had fallen off. His wavy hair was standing on the end. "Well, there you have it," he said, tottering back on the platform. "That was a disarming charm, you see. I've lost my wand." "Ah, thank you, Miss Brown. Yes, an excellent idea to show them that, Professor Snape. But if you wouldn't mind saying so, it was very obvious what you were about to do. If I had wanted to stop you, I would have been too easy. However, it felt it would be instructive for them to see." Snape was looking murderous. Possibly Lockhart had noticed, because he said, "Enough demonstrating. I'm going to come amongst you now and put you all into pairs. Professor Snape, if you'd like to help me." They moved through the crowd, matching up partners. Lockhart teamed Neville with Justin Finch Fletchley, but Snape reached Harry and Ron first. "Time to split up the dream team, I think," he sneered. "Weasley, you partner with Finnegan. Potter?" Harry moved automatically towards Hermione. "I don't think so," said Snape, smiling. "Mr. Malfoy, come over here. Let's see what you could make of the famous Potter. And you, Miss Granger, you can partner with Miss Bulstrode." Malfoy strutted over, smirking. Behind him walked a Slytherin girl who reminded Harry of a picture he'd seen in the holidays with hags. She was large and square, and her heavy jaw jutted aggressively. Hermione gave her a weak smile, which she did not return. "Face your partners," called Lockhart on the platform, "and bow." Harry and Malfoy barely inclined their heads, not taking their eyes off each other. "Wands at the ready," shouted Lockhart. "When I count to 3, cast your charms to disarm your opponent. Only disarm. We don't want any accidents. 1, 2, 3. Harry swung his wand over his shoulder, but Malfoy had already started on 2. His spell hit Harry so hard that he thought he had been hit by the head with a saucepan. He stumbled, but everything was still, and he seemed to be working and wasting no more time. Harry pointed his wand right at Malfoy and said, Recut siempra. Sorry, guys, these are hard words. A jet of silver light hit Malfoy in the stomach, and he doubled up, wheezing. "I said disarm only," Lockhart shouted, alarm over the heads of the battling crowd. As Malfoy sank to his knees, Harry had hit him with the tickling charm, and he could barely move for laughing. Harry hung back with a vague feeling that it would be unsporting to bewitch Malfoy while he was on the floor, but it was a mistake. Gasping for breath, Malfoy pointed his wand at Harry's knees. Tangalara! And the next second, Harry's legs began to jerk out of control in a quick step. Stop, stop! Screamed Lockhart, but Snape took charge. Vinte incantam, he shouted. Harry's feet stopped dancing. Malfoy stopped laughing. They were able to look up. A haze of greenish smoke was hovering over the scene. Both Neville and Justin were lying on the floor, panting. Ron was holding up an ashen-faced Seamus, apologizing for whatever he had broken wand had done. But Hermione and Millicent Bulstrode were still moving. Millicent had Hermione in a headlock, and Hermione was whimpering in pain. Both of their wands lay forgotten on the floor. Harry leapt forward and pulled Millicent off. It was difficult. She was bigger than he was. Dear, dear, said Lockhart, skidding through the crowd, looking up at the aftermath of the duels. Up you get. Macleman, careful there. Miss Fawcett, pinch it hard. It'll stop bleeding in a second. Boot. I'd better think I'd teach you how to block unfriendly spells, Lockhart, standing flustered in the middle of the hall. He glanced at Snape, whose black eyes glinted, and looked away. Let's have a volunteer. Longbottom and Finch-Flitchley, how about you? It's a bad idea, Professor Lockhart, said Snape, gliding over the large male violent bat. Longbottom causes devastation with the simplest of spells. We'll be sending what's left of Finch-Fletchley up to the hospital wing in a matchbox. Neville's round face wet pinker. How about Malfoy and Potter? Said Snape with a twisted smile. Excellent idea, said Lockhart, gesturing Harry and Malfoy into the middle of the hall, as the crowd backed away to give them room. Now, Harry, said Lockhart, when Draco points his wand at you, do this. He raised his wand up to attempt to do a complicated sort of wiggling action and dropped it. Snape smirked at Lockhart, quickly picked it up, saying, "Oops, my little wand is a little overexcited." Snape moved closer to Malfoy, bent down and whispered something in his ear. Malfoy smirked too. Harry looked nervously up at Lockhart and said, "Professor, could you show me that blocking thing again?" "Scared," muttered Malfoy, so Lockhart couldn't hear him. "You wish," said Harry out of the corner of his mouth. Lockhart cuffed Harry merrily on the shoulder. "Just do what I said, Harry." "What, drop my wand?" But Lockhart wasn't listening. 3, 2, 1, go, he shouted. Malfoy raised his wand quickly and bellowed, Serpensortia. The end of his wand exploded. Harry watched aghast as a long black snake shot out of it, fell heavily onto the floor between them, ready to strike. There were screams from the crowd swiftly, clearing the floor. "Don't move, Potter," said Snape lazily, clearly enjoying the sight of Harry standing motionless. "I'll get rid of it." "Allow me," said Lockhart. He brandished his wand, and he brandished his wand at the snake, and there was a loud bang. The snake, instead of vanishing, flew 10 feet into the air and fell back on the floor with a loud smack. Enraged, hissing furiously, it slithered straight towards Justin Finch-Flitchley and raised itself again, being exposed, ready to strike. Harry wasn't sure what made him do it. He wasn't aware of deciding to do it at all. He knew his legs were carrying him forward, and he was on the casters, and that he had shouted stupidly at the snake, "Leave him!" And miraculously, inexplicably, the snake slumped to the floor, docile as thick garden hose, its eyes now on Harry. Harry felt the fear drain out of him. He knew the snake wouldn't attack anyone now, though he knew it. He couldn't have explained it. He looked up at Justin, grinning, expectantly to see Justin relieved or puzzled or even grateful, but certainly not angry or scared. "What do you think you're playing at?" he shouted. Before Harry could say anything, Justin turned and stormed out of the great hall. Snape stepped forward, waved his wand, and the snake vanished in a small puff of black smoke. Snape, too, was looking at Harry in an unexpected way. It was a shrewd and calculating look. Harry didn't like it. He was so dimly aware of this ominous muttering around the halls, he felt a tugging on the back of his robes. "Come on," said Ron's voice in his ear. "Move on, come on." Ron steered him out of the hall, and Hermione hurried alongside them. As they went through the doors, the people on either side drew away as if they were frightened. Catching something, Harry didn't have a clue what was going on, and neither Ron nor Hermione explained anything until they had dragged him all the way to the empty Gryffindor common room. Then Ron pushed Harry into an armchair and said, "You're a Parselmouth? Why didn't you tell us?" "I'm a what?" said Harry. "I'm a Parselmouth," said Ron. "You can talk to snakes." Oh, I know, said Harry. It's the second time I've done it. I accidentally said a boa constrictor to my cousin Dudley at the zoo once. Long story, but it was telling me I'd never seen Brazil, and I sort of set it free without meaning to. That was before I knew I was a wizard. A boa constrictor told you it had never seen Brazil? Ron repeated faintly. So, said Harry, but a lot of people can do it. Oh, no, they can't, said Ron. It's not a very common gift. Harry, this is bad. What's bad? Said Harry, starting to feel quite angry. What's wrong with everyone? Listen, I hadn't told the snake not to attack Justin. Oh, that's what you said to it? What do you mean? You were there. You heard me. I heard you speaking parcel tongue, said Ron. Snake language. You could have been saying anything. No wonder Justin sounded panicked. It was like you were egging the snake on or something. It was creepy, you know? Harry gaped at him. I spoke in a different language? But I didn't realize how could I speak in a different language without knowing I could speak it? Ron shook his head. Both he and Hermione were looking as though someone had died. Harry could see that what was so terrible. Do you want me to tell you what's wrong with stopping a dirty great snake biting Justin's head off? He said. What does it matter how I did it as long as Justin have to join the headless hunt? It matters, said Hermione, speaking in a last hushed voice, because being able to talk to Snake was what Salazar Slytherin was famous for. That's why the symbol of Slytherin House is a serpent. Exactly, said Ron. And now the whole school is going to think you're his great-great-great-grandson or something. But I'm not, said Harry in a panic. He couldn't quite explain. You'll find that hard to prove, said Hermione. He lived about 1,000 years ago. For all we know, you could be. Harry lay awake for hours that night. Through a gape in the hangings around the four-poster, he watched the snow starting to drift past the tower to the window. Could he be a descendant of Salazar Slytherin? He didn't know anything about his father's family after all. The Dursleys is already forbidding questions about his wizarding relatives. Quietly, Harry tried to say something in parcel tongue, but the words wouldn't come. It seemed to be his face-to-face with a snake to do it. But I'm in Gryffindor, Harry thought. The Sorting Hat wouldn't have put me if I had Slytherin blood. Ah, said a nasty little voice in his brain. But the Sorting Hat wanted to put you in Slytherin, don't you remember? Harry turned over. He could see Justin next day in herbology, and he could explain what he'd been calling the snake off, not egging it on, which, he thought angrily, plummeting his pillow. Any fool should have realized. And that is where we will stop today. So, Harry speaks parcel tongue. I want you guys to think about what this may mean, and is he the heir to Slytherin, which would mean he opened the Chamber of Secrets. All right, everyone, have a great day, and I will talk to you all soon. Miss you guys lots. Bye-bye.